very good morning to one and all present here. Today, as a part of our 11th campus interaction of the Podium, it fills me with a great sense of pride to inform you that we have with us Ms. Tulsi Mirchandaney, Managing Director and Accountable Manager for Blue Dart Aviation Limited. Blue Dart Aviation Limited is South Africa's largest domestic express cargo airline that has successfully sustained and grown its operations since its inception in 1996. It undertakes scheduled operations in Kolkata, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad and Ahmedabad with skilled and professional manpower strength of almost 800 people. Ms. Mirchandaney is responsible for operations of the airline, including flight operations, maintenance and ground handling activities. She has been actively associated with the airline and express industry for over 35 years. Her other achievements include major accounts and interline agreements with international airlines, initiating charter services and setting up accounting, sales and operation systems for these services. She was also instrumental in branding activities which have been recognized through various awards in the organization and developed the industry segment module currently used in market research. Prior to joining Blue Dart Aviation in 2008, she was Senior Vice President, Marketing and Projects for Blue Dart Express. In 2007, she undertook additional role of Senior Advisor in Blue Dart Express for the rollout of First Choice. During the 100-year celebration of civil aviation, Ms. Tulsi was awarded for her significant contribution to civil aviation in India by Ministry of Civil Aviation. Ms. Mirchandaney has done her MBA in International Aviation from Concordia University, Montreal. She has also created a website for Aviation Center for Excellence. Ma'am, may I now request you to come over the stage and engage the audience in an insightful and interactive session.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Students, or should I say future leaders, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I think firstly because it's always a stimulating experience to interact with fresh, active minds. I may not always agree with some of the opinions of our youth today, but I find the fearlessness of youth increasingly to deviate from the well-trodden paths admirable. It's also very good for me to be back in Shillong because I spent the early and, if I may say, best part of my childhood here. Of course, when I was in school, I think we had all of 4 cars in the whole of Shillong. And I had to walk a fair way every day to school. I find the traffic explosion, both human and vehicular, a little bit intimidating. But changes nevertheless. I can't help feeling very proud that we have an IAM in Shillong, and I hope that your future endeavor will have a positive impact in this region. I thought I would share with you an aspect of aviation, something that I've been in for many years, that has received very little attention or visibility, even though it has done its share in contributing to the world economy. And I'm talking about the air transportation of goods rather than passengers. 45% of trade by value is transported by air, even though tonnages account for less than 10%. Now, aviation, as you know, is very heavily regulated. Safety is an overarching guiding principle of everything we do, because the very business of aviation itself is contrary to the laws of nature. And some of you may be aware that in commercial aviation, not just in India but in the USA, started with airmail. India's first legendary flight on the 18th of February 1911 carried documents and packages. And I don't know if you also know that was really the first commercial flight in the aviation history. Unfortunately, there has been very little progress since that historic event. Progress has been very low. except for the open skies policy that was announced in 1991. And that was really to clear all the stockpiles of exports that were lying across the country, at airports across the country. And it really benefited the foreign international operators more than the Indian operators. What it did was really liberalize the Indian skies for international freighter operations. There has been very little major stimulation for this segment by the government. And that is really very unfortunate, because by and large, air cargo is still viewed as a byproduct of passenger airlines. You have the belly hold capacity of an aircraft, and it is viewed as a capacity that's not utilized by passenger baggage and that can be leveraged to generate extra cargo revenue. So you find that across the country you have spanky new carpeted passenger terminals, but air cargo is often relegated to the older, more dilapidated areas of the airport, even though in some airports it accounts for 30% or more revenue. So you could call us the backroom boys, and we were invariably treated as such. When I joined Japan Airlines and I was in their cargo department about 40 years ago, I would get calls from numerous people, but they all had one request in common. They would all ask to speak to the man in charge. And you could imagine my absolute delight in telling them each time that there was actually none. But then we've moved on a fair way since that time. The world has moved on. With the arrival of Air Express, and that was about 3 decades ago, Air Express transformed the transportation of goods by air into a very successful process-driven system. Air Express, or Courier, as it is better known to most of you today, is a subset of air cargo. So while air cargo focuses on the airport-to-airport delivery of goods, Air Express looks at the entire chain from door to door, and it integrates the whole process, including customs clearance, into the air network with the help of advanced tracking technology that can provide shipping information in real time across the process. Customers found it fast, reliable, and the rest, as we know, is history. Air Express replaced not just airmail, but air cargo and other forms of transportation, and it provided the support to critical supply chains of numerous industries with just-in-time deliveries and reducing inventory carrying cost. Air Express is now a $175 billion industry worldwide, and it's really dominated by 3 major players who I'm sure you all know: DHL, FedEx, and UPS. It started out in the USA with just a 4% market share in the early 70s, and today it dominates air transportation with about a 60% market share. In Europe, it's over 50% of the market, and in Asia and India, the trends are by and large the same. And you will find that Air Express carriers in all parts of the world really operate huge fleet of aircraft. DHL, UPS, and FedEx, between the 3 of them, operate a fleet of over 1,300 aircraft, which is sizable. And 80% of the freighters of the world are operated by Air Express operators. You'll see the distinction between the passenger growths and the Air Express growths is really marked by the divergent ways in which they have progressed through the years. They've really evolved in diametrically opposite directions. Passenger air travel is becoming increasingly commoditized, denuded of frills, catering to larger constituencies. Whereas if you look at cargo, and also I think you may have noticed, there's so many masses today for whom flying was a distant dream, and now they are able to afford air travel because of the arrival of low-cost carriers. But if you look at Air Express, it's charted a completely divergent course for itself. Air Express is more customized to the individual customer and it caters to a business constituency. So you know, the belly hold capacity that I was mentioning earlier of passenger airlines, you'll find that that capacity has been outpaced by the quantum leap in the dedicated infrastructure that is provided by Air Express, because it operates at night to business requirements. And typically during a business day, you have the end of the manufacturing process. So you have a late night cutoff, we operate at night and we deliver early in the morning before the beginning of the next business day. So you will find today that passengers, the vast majority of passengers travel economy, whereas goods are traveling business or maybe sometimes even first class. And these trends are really driven by user groups. The major driver is really the greater customization of goods and services and the power of the individual customer, which I'm sure all of you are aware of today. You know, you could log on to the web and you could select your laptop or even a home plan with which to design your home, and you could have it customized to your requirements. In the same way that perhaps you could order for a pizza with your choice of toppings and have it delivered to your home. The second major driver has really been the advancement of globalization. The resources are no longer confined to the points of production. They are outsourced to suppliers of the highest quality at the lowest cost, and they can exist anywhere in the globe. So you can have a product that's designed in one country, raw material procured from a second, assembly in a third, and marketed by a fourth. And according to a report on the contribution of air cargo to economic development, it is said that the procurements of spares and components, some of them, involve over 200 border crossings. And the third driver, I think, which all of you are aware of today, is really the internet. In the global marketplace of the internet, business is no longer constrained by shelf space. You know, the internet has enabled limitless choice. And you have products that can be displayed practically free of cost. So even the smallest entrepreneur, the smallest product that's manufactured, when it's aggregated over millions of customers on the web, can be thriving and profitable. And in this kind of scenario, the key that keeps the wheels of trade moving really across the world is efficient logistics. There's a World Bank report that was initiated in 2007 and it's published every 2 years, the Logistics Performance Index. And that confirms that a country that promotes effective and cost-efficient logistics and transport can achieve a 1 to 2% greater economic growth than countries at the same level of development. So there's a huge opportunity in the area in which we're in. In this express space, the story of Blue Dart, and I'm including both Blue Dart Express and Blue Dart Aviation, I'll explain the difference a little later, is a very simple and, if I may say so, a rather heartwarming one. Blue Dart started out, the founders started out with a very humble corpus of 30,000 rupees, a great vision in 1983. They started out setting up a courier company that was focused on the deliveries of urgent export samples that had to be delivered within a permitted period of time. Initially, they didn't even have a wayside, an airport warehouse. The shipments were segregated outside the airport. But I think the direction right down to the most junior employee was very clear. The customer promise had to be kept and shipments had to be delivered by 10:30 in the morning. And employees went the extra mile to make that happen. I remember during those times that, the country would be shut down perhaps with a strike or some other disruption, but there would be over 90% attendance in a Blue Dart office. I think the major driver was really the vision, and the vision was not framed or conceived by the three founders. It was done by the 600 managers across the country. We needn't have been the biggest, but we had to be the best. profitably and with a human conscience. Around 1994, the company's focus shifted from international to domestic, and that's when the airline Blue Dart Aviation was created. And there were two primary strategic drivers for that. The first, of course, was the realization that domestic distribution was a huge opportunity. We have a large geography, large domestic consumption. We have great entrepreneurship in this country, and therefore it was a very large opportunity. And the second was really the white space that existed in air capacity. Now, the capacity that was available at that time was only whatever was offered by the private passenger airlines, and that operated during the day. It couldn't meet the increasing demands in terms of either volumes or in terms of dimensions of what was required. And it operated to passenger schedules and not business requirements. So that was when the airline Blue Dart Aviation was created, and it was just focused on delivering shipments to customers within a permitted time. Now, to gain control over the entire process, and that was necessary if we were to deliver the highest quality at the lowest cost, right from inception, even with a tiny fleet of two aircraft and two small aircraft. We only had Boeing 737s at that time, with a capacity of 15 tons each. But right from then, we said we needed to establish our own airframe maintenance capability as well as our own ground handling. And our heavy maintenance capability really today is a source of great reliability as well as cost efficiency. A lot of innovation went into areas of cost savings. For instance, we designed our own main deck loaders. That is the equipment where you lift shipments and load them on the aircraft. And we fabricated it at about 20% of the cost of the original. Even the routes that we adhere to till today does not subscribe to the normal hub and spoke system that we have worldwide. We designed our own model, which really optimized the utilization of a very small fleet of aircraft, and yet provided the kind of late night operations and early morning deliveries that we wanted. And amenities were pretty basic at that time. I remember that when I joined, my room was maybe 5 feet by 5 feet. Our headquarters was this maze of tiny cubicles in the basement of an apartment building that was richly called Lumbini Palace, but it was anything but a palace. When my HR head, who was 2 cubicles down, switched on his air conditioning, I had to wear a jacket because my room froze. The temperature in his room seemed to be surprisingly pleasant. And a lot of meticulous and detailed planning went into the launch of the airline. In the 7 months prior to our launch, everyone else in that room slept heavily. And I remember I used to drive out of the office at midnight every night, inhaling that lifetime full of secondhand smoke and smelling like the Marlboro Man, for those of you who remember the ad. But there was such a huge buzz in the organization. We had to design everything from scratch, because there was no precedent. There was no policy for a cargo airline. All the policies were created for passenger airlines. Even the air operator certificate that we had, which enabled us to fly, really, was an air taxi operator certificate. There was none for cargo. We weren't allowed to distribute international shipments domestically because that was the prerogative of the national airlines. And a lot of what we did sounded a little illogical and demented. Blue Dart was an unknown airline. We were not members of IATA, which is the International Air Transport Agency. And yet we went out to all the international airlines and said, hey, can you give us your shipments to distribute domestically, or we can carry it to your gateway, because that was another opportunity for us. And all of them said, why? Especially since you have rates that are higher than the market. But we pursued it relentlessly and resolutely. And when they did sign up, the whole organization was there, everyone, regardless of rank, ensuring that we gave them the best possible service in the market. And we ended up by signing about 24 of them in a short span of 24 years. And finally, on the 17th of June 1996, our two aircraft, our two 737s, took off from Kolkata and from Chennai. And the whole organization just went crazy with excitement and pride. We'd finally done it. Last year we celebrated our 15th anniversary. And today, 16 years later, after that event in 1996, we are still the only domestic freighter operators in the Indian skies. Blue Dart Express has grown from a corpus of 30,000 rupees to a company of 1,490 crores. We have a fleet of 5 757 freighters, each of which carries 34 tons or more. And we offer a capacity of 400 tons every night, which is the largest capacity today. And I think each one of us in the company still has that great feeling of pride and excitement every time we see our aircraft at any of the airports. Mind you, aviation, and make no mistake, aviation is very tough. The environment is very demanding and it can be very, very unforgiving. We've seen 6 startups that have failed since our inception 16 years ago. I think we have been fortunate to have sustained and grown our operations, and everything is really thanks to the people that we have. We very successfully navigated the downturn of 2009, and we managed to do that because a lot of the cost-saving measures really came up through the ranks. And we did not let go of a single employee during that time. So human capital, I think the passion, the professionalism, commitment cannot be replaced by technology. And as we transition the 100 years of aviation and we go into the future, the challenges are going to be even more demanding as we go forward. The traffic congestion in the Indian skies, the high rates of aviation turbine fuel, the constraints at the airports, no parking bays, no facilities available, the more stringent regulatory environment now, because increasingly you've seen safety has become an issue, especially after the Bangalore crash, becoming even more stringent, and the lack of qualified manpower. As we grow, we need an average of 5 sets of pilots for each aircraft. That's 10 pilots for each aircraft. Now you multiply that by the number of fleet that you have today, and look at the growth. The passenger growth has been about 40% year over year till we went through that downturn. And you multiply that by 10 years, and you look at the thousands of pilots that we would need today. We still don't have those qualified pilots. Now we've seen some amazing improvements on the passenger side. We've seen the huge growth in air travel thanks to the arrival of the low-cost carriers. But there's also been process improvements. Today, when an international passenger exits from an Indian airport, it's within a few minutes of his arrival, which is perhaps even more efficient than what you see in some of the largest airports in the world, including in the USA. But unfortunately, the same kind of process improvements haven't happened with the air express or the air cargo side. The dwell time, which is really the time when a shipment is unloaded from an aircraft till the time it is delivered to the customer, is abysmally low. And we still have huge constraints in terms of the space that is given to us at the airport, the ability to park our aircraft. So some of the hugest challenges that we are going to face when we go into the future are really that of access and that of cost. Access of really getting into an airport where we need to operate, and the astronomical cost of being able to operate on those airports. But that in itself presents huge opportunities. Recently, the Ministry of Aviation published the working group report on air cargo logistics, and we were part of that working group, and we worked for over a year to finally make our submissions on all the issues and gaps that we saw in the logistics. And we presented it to the government. And one of the positive outcomes of that is that we have established an air cargo logistics promotion board. And we hope that that would give the essential recognition and the encouragement to the sector. Because really there is a huge opportunity in our country, given our geographical spread, the fact that we still don't have the kind of infrastructure that you have perhaps in the USA, with very efficient surface transportation, and the kind of domestic consumption and the people that we have. Because whether we manufacture for domestic distribution or export, or whether we import for domestic consumption or for value addition for re-export, there's always got to be a necessity for distribution. There will always be a need for distribution from points of production to the points of consumption. And I've always maintained that when the smallest entrepreneur in India's hinterland can access markets for his products, whether domestically or internationally, speedily and cost-effectively, in the same way that he can now access cost-effective domestic or international trade. It is only then that we can really say that we are an Indian. I think each of you in this room is capable of making that happen. And I am sincerely hopeful that some of you are successful in bringing about that geographic or that logistics access into this rich and diverse region of ours to make it realize its full potential. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Mirchandaney. I have a couple of questions. The first one being, most of the freight currently is carried over trains and then over roads. My question is, what is the future of air carriers in this regard, and where do we see an increase in demand? The next question is, we are seeing that Blue Dart is showing great, huge volumes. So what is that differentiator which makes people choose Blue Dart over other air carriers? The third question is, the last one. You talked that currently you don't follow the hub and spoke model. Then what is the other model you follow to show efficient operations? Thank you.
Alright, your first question was, when you're saying so many goods travel by train. I think, as I mentioned, increasingly we're seeing customization. What people want is to outsource their logistics or their operations, to bring about greater efficiency, and they focus on their core business. And we find that, transportation is just one small portion of what they're really looking at. They're looking at the entire process. One is, can you pick it up from door, deliver it to your consignee at the other door, and how efficiently can you do it, which is one. Secondly, the flow, the reverse flow of information is as important as the flow of your goods. Because when you're looking at reducing inventory carrying costs, you're really looking at really being there spot on. You can't afford any disruptions. When you're looking at a train, firstly you're looking at a certain period of time. Now, do you have the kind of people who can be focused on segregating that individual shipment and delivering it to the customer at the other end? You can imagine the volumes that are perhaps in a train coach. You have 20 tons. Now, segregating an envelope from that 20 tons is a huge task. A lot of what we do seems very simple. But when you actually get down to segregating it and getting it to the right customer at the right time, and ensuring that, if there's a reverse
a flow of either information or if he wants to send it back, you're able to do it within a specified period of time. You still need to do it, which is why I think we've still grown and Speed Post is still growing. And in some way they haven't met that gap that's there in terms of customer demand. And it's necessary because when you want to reach markets, I think with the increasing obsolescence of goods, you can't really afford to wait. You know, you can't afford any errors. We operate at a 99.96% net reliability level right now, which means that even that sometimes is too much. You know, because when you're talking about, on an average, we carried about 10 million shipments last year. Now, on an average, we carry almost, 250,000 envelopes a day. Now, you can imagine, if you're going to sit down and issue an airway bill for those envelopes, you know, because when you go to a Speed Post office, you have to make out an airway bill. Imagine standing in the queue and writing out airway bills for 250 shipments. It's a huge operation. So I think they still need to get their processes in order, and I still feel there's always going to be a gap for that kind of efficiency that you need. So that is question number one. I think your question, the other one was to do with the model, the hub and spoke system.
What differentiates Blue Diamond? Why do people prefer it over other carriers?
Yeah. Now, we're the only express operator today with dedicated air infrastructure. All the other express operators really have to depend on passenger airlines, and that is unreliable. If you have a full flight and you have people coming in from the Gulf and filling in your aircraft with, your TV and your whatever, there's no space for cargo. Cargo is of secondary importance. The passenger is more important. He gets priority. So when you have to depend on that kind of critical infrastructure, I don't think you can depend on something where you are number two in terms of priority. So if you see the market share of Blue Dart Express today, in this market they have almost 48% market share. And the next competitor has something like a 17% market share. And they're really focused on volume shipments that are low cost. The third is the hub and spoke system. Typically, when you look at large geographies which are in economically more developed countries, like say USA, FedEx has a hub and spoke model. They can afford to do that because they have so many aircraft. I think they have close to 600 aircraft of various capacities. It can vary from about 6 tons depending on the individual economic ability of a certain region or a state to a volume of 120 tons. And at one time they were even looking at the A380s. So when you're looking at that kind of fleet, it is possible to have a hub and spoke model. When we looked at a hub and spoke model, first of all, the hub had to be in the center of India for it to be effective. And if you look at Nagpur, which is touted as the best hub, and you can see that some airlines that have operated with Nagpur as a hub have failed. There is no production in Nagpur that can warrant those kind of volumes. If you're looking at 400 tons a night, it won't emanate from a place like Nagpur. So what we did is, initially we evolved what is known as a milk run. We had an aircraft that was in Chennai and another one that was in Calcutta. And we operate on what we call the crescent route. So it starts off at 10:30 at night and it reaches the last point in the crescent by 8 o'clock in the morning, which enables that 10:30 a.m. delivery. And as the volumes grow, because we tend to be a very conservative organization, a lot of people put in great capacity, and I'm sure you've read the media reports about all the losses that are dogging airlines today. And one of the reasons is because they put in so much capacity into the market. There's so much competition that they have to bring down their rates to such a low level that they're no longer able to cover their costs. And aviation is hugely, hugely expensive. Your assets are very, very expensive. For us, we derive our aircraft from the secondary market as a freighter operator, unlike a passenger airline that looks at a very young fleet. Even a 15-year-old aircraft or a 20-year-old aircraft today, by the time it gets to us, costs about $23 million. That's a lot of money. So when you're looking at making it cost effective, you optimize all the capacity available. And we tend to be conservative, so when we reach a load factor, generally between 80 and 85%, we then look at where is the economic demand, because in a country like India, you have such a huge economic imbalance. Typically, for instance, Calcutta is a gateway to the northeast. Huge inbound demand, but then not a lot of outbound production. Now, how do you service a place like that? What kind of capacity do you need to put into that place? So as we reach a load factor that varies normally between 80 to 85%, we put in another aircraft, and then we look at the demand between 2 points and see how we can meet that demand, and then extend it into a secondary demand area. So it's never hub and spoke for us. That's one reason. And the second reason is, if you look at India's geography today, I think till we have a hub that's able to generate great amounts of load, until we have till they do away with the constraints of capacity. To give you an example, Bombay is perhaps an ideal hub as we go into the future. But where's the parking? There's parking space available. For us to get 3 aircraft in, I think I have to pay a pilgrimage to the Ministry of Civil Aviation continuously for a period of 1 year. So, we have to also be practical. So, I think given these, we've tried to make the best of what we have. I hope that answers your question.
My name is Mudit. My question is related to e-commerce. With the growth in e-commerce, is the logistics industry ready to take all that demand which the e-commerce industry will come up with? And I was reading the other day that with the increasing competition in e-commerce, some e-commerce companies might demand same-day delivery or something like that, which happens in US. So, what is the stage? At what level or what stage is the logistics industry to give support to that? And is there space for new entrants, or is the existing players will be able to manage it or take it over?
As I mentioned, it's a very good question, Mudit. As I mentioned in my talk, one of the key drivers is really e-commerce. We thought it would come about somewhere in the early 2000s, but I think it's now when we're seeing that inflection point and the huge growth. And you're very right, that is where the base is low, but that's where we're seeing the highest growth. I think there's ample opportunity for many players in that space, because it's very difficult. First of all, you have the demand of logistics, which is what we already have in place. But I think additionally, a lot of people now demand cash on delivery, which means that we have a very large workforce in Blue Dart Express. We have about 7,000 people, and we have close to 1,000 in Blue Dart Aviation. But you can imagine controlling all those people who need to make that delivery for the last mile, and trusting them to bring back, the cash. So you have problems like that exist. How do you handle the cash on delivery? How do you handle same-day delivery? And then we found that a lot of customers are unsatisfied with the product and they want to return it. So you also have, shipments coming back. And then you have the additional tasks of getting the shipments back. But as you mentioned, it's a huge opportunity, and I think that is one area that can really grow. And we've seen the highest, absolute highest growths really coming in from that segment.
Morning, ma'am. My name is Arpit. I'm a second year participant here. My question actually follows what he asked. With the increasing competition in the market, as we know, businesses have moved from looking for service providers to solution providers to strategic partners, so that they can integrate their processes and provide the best value. With this view, how will this view shape the air cargo industry in the future? firstly. And secondly, will the air cargo service providers stick to their core businesses or would like to expand it so that they can fit into the businesses that are taking their services?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about, service providers like us really becoming strategic partners. And I think we realized that early on, because for instance in the early 90s, when a lot of people didn't even think about this, we had an alliance with Citibank, where we had our people sitting in, and ensuring that the credit card deliveries, the security and what was required in terms of, the information was provided confidentially to us, so we could send out those thousands of credit cards all across the country. And I think that has been extremely successful because today I think we handle about 90% of that market. But increasingly, yes, customers are looking at areas like that in various aspects. What is the kind of packaging they need? If they have a certain delivery requirement, for instance, can we also do a repair and return? There are various areas like that. So I think, as I mentioned, it's increasingly customized, which means that, increasingly we are becoming more like strategic partners who advise them what is the best possible way to send out their shipments so that they can reach the markets and they can meet the customers' demands effectively. So that, I agree, is it's very much there. I think we all realize it and we all make sure it happens. And as we go into the future, I still feel that the opportunities are huge because there's so many areas that you can get into. And I think it's very individual. When we started out in aviation, we're the only ones that operate the 757, for instance, over here in the country. If you look at all the passenger airline operators, they all operate either a 737 or an A320, and I'm talking about domestic operations. So we've managed, we set up our heavy airframe maintenance right from inception. And we've progressively improved so that today we have the permission from the DGCA to carry out the highest check level on the aircraft, which is really almost pulling the hull apart and putting it back together. And we've often been asked, can you undertake a maintenance, repair and overhaul for 757 aircraft? So I think these are opportunities that come up. But in our company at least, we've always said that core should remain core. And our core business is really distribution. And we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg, believe me. Today, Blue Dart Express caters to about 62 industry segments in varying volumes. And that can only increase, whether you look at time-definite logistics or you're looking at the cold chain. You're even looking at the agriculture sector, that I'm sure is scheduled to grow as we go forward. How can you provide a specific cold chain for that? Just to give you an example, when we started out in 1996, we had an aircraft based in Calcutta. And we said it's there during the day. And one of the means by which we can lower cost is looking at greater utilization of this aircraft. So we said, was there an opportunity in the Northeast? Could we operate into Guwahati, for instance? We could operate during the day, there's a lot coming out from here. Is it possible? So I remember attending a seminar in Guwahati, and this was in 1997. And some of the issues that were brought up during that seminar was that, for instance, your pineapple product, there is really only a 45-day time between the time of harvesting and the time that really, it's no longer available for sending out. And one of the issues that was brought up is that they didn't have post-harvest technology. They didn't have the cold warehouses to store the products, and therefore they couldn't send it out of the country. I mean, just look at that wasted effort. How much more can you do in this part of the region? We've had many requests for charters. I believe that the ginger from this part of the world is almost the best. It's completely fiberless. But then you have so many small farmers. Do you have a cooperative that can get them all together and then send them out, make it cost effective? So many opportunities and logistics. You know, one of the things that we did at that time in 1997, I went and spoke to some of the shipping companies, the sea shipping companies, and I said, do you have one of these refrigerated containers? Because if building a cold warehouse is so expensive, you have the sea containers that are refrigerated, and all you need to do is plug it into a parcel. So then you could store the shipments that require the necessary refrigeration and then send them out before they completely spoiled. Now, unfortunately, no one bothered. That's sad to say, and we didn't get into it because it's not core business. But yes, there are opportunities for people to get into those areas of logistics. So you could start out by maybe looking at a cooperative, looking at how you could consolidate shipments, and then looking at the transportation segment and seeing it as an opportunity out of this region or anywhere else. You have horticulture, and many other industries that are only going to be evolve and grow in the future.
Hello ma'am, I'm Shirish. I wanted to ask, due to shortage of number of airports and the infrastructure in smaller towns, especially in India, do you have constraints about places you can deliver, and you have to deliver through other modes of transport like rail and road? So how do you ensure on-time performance, or you probably deliver only to the smaller towns that you can cater to, or do you have partnerships with others? Thank you.
Blue Dart Express delivers to, I think, almost 30,000 locations across the country, and they use all forms of transportation. In the early days, they used cycle, boat, in some places even motorbikes, anything. I think in some places where there's small connectivity, people walk and deliver. So, for the last mile, there could be any forms of transportation because you're looking at the capability and the infrastructure in that small town and how can you deliver. I agree that we are not as prevalent as India Post, which has something like 600,000 locations in the country, and they have a huge opportunity, but they do really a social service to the country, and they're doing a great job. They offer great reliability. But when we look at the smaller towns, there are constraints. For instance, Guwahati, the watch hours are only till 8 o'clock at night. So when you're looking at connecting into, another airport of ours, it becomes very difficult for us to then keep an aircraft here operating, during the day and then take it. It becomes very expensive also. So it means looking at another fleet type to cater to these airports. So currently we operate to 7 airports, 7 of the major airports, and then we use any other form of transportation, including passenger airlines, to get to the next point, and then we deliver to the closest location, depending on where the demand is. So it could vary. I think each one needs to frame or design, the most effective form of transportation. But we don't confine it to the major metros. We deliver to some of the tiniest little towns in very many places.
Ensuring on-time performance for delivery through roads, and is it, how do you manage to do it here?
What we do is, we've got a complete chart of every single location that we deliver to. So you have a 24-hour delivery where it involves some kind of surface transportation. You are then given, 48-hour delivery. We know where we can deliver by 10:30 a.m. We know where we can deliver by 1200 hours. So all those are very clearly defined. And around 2006, Blue Dart Express also saw surface transportation as, rather than just a last mile delivery, as another opportunity to look at surface deliveries, but it would still be within a committed time. So it's different from your full truckload or from your smaller trucking deliveries that you have. It's still on a committed time. So your trucks move at a given schedule, whether or not it's full. it departs at a certain time, it arrives at a certain time, and most of them have GPS so that you know where the trucks are, you know who's wasting time, and you know how to control the entire deliveries through the whole network.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I am Anand Jain and I am a second year participant. My question is also related towards the e-commerce industry. So if you look at the cost structure of the logistics and the cash on delivery, so it is a bit favored towards high margin products like electronic gadgets and others. So how do you can make this more attractive for products which have smaller margins like FMCG products?
Yeah, very relevant question. I think, when you look at the products that we carry, if the unit cost of the product is going to be, lower than the cost of transportation, then I think it's not viable. So primarily, Air Express is given to higher value or urgent products. So you're looking at, as I mentioned, banking and financial services. You're looking at pharma products. You're looking at just-in-time deliveries, automotive. There are various types of products. But I think one needs to be practical that, as I mentioned, if the unit cost is lower than transportation, it really doesn't make sense. Unless, you have something that's really urgent, and we do operate charters. So we've operated charters sometimes that just carry one part because it's required in an assembly line somewhere, it's urgent. You have situations like that. We've had charters that carry cricket equipment, broadcast equipment during cricket matches, stuff like that. So fish seeds, which are perishable, highly perishable, which need to be there at a certain time, those are given to air transportation. But FMCG, I doubt it. I doubt that we will ever see a time when, we will like that, because is it really urgent to have a cake of soap at a given time, at a committed time delivered to a customer?